technical difficulties. I tested this stream 3 times, including like an hour ago, but it seems like the live stream gods are against us. So I'm going to record this for anybody. I'm going to record it on my phone. I don't know how long my phone's going to actually last. And then I'll just basically now make it a YouTube video. So yeah, I'll drain my entire battery. But anyways, welcome everybody. My name's Perry. Welcome to a historic, by the way, we also got a bad mic. Hello there. Welcome to a historic local Blossomers meetup. This is the first time that that the users of Blossom have ever organized amongst themselves in a formal way. And thanks to a lot of support from the Blossom team themselves, who really not only helped us financially, but also with us support, and actually decided they even wanted to come to Winnipeg, and we even turned the heat up just for today. And then tomorrow will be a snowstorm, so. So anyways, I'm very excited about this. You know, we normally see a lot of these big Blossom events and the user community meetings in the big cities like Toronto and Vancouver and stuff. So it's really nice to actually see it here in Winnipeg. I already told Max and Adrian that we're the biggest little city in Canada, so when we do things right, and we do it as a community. So we've gotten great support from everybody here. That we did sell out. We could have actually gotten even larger. So, but this is the first for us, so we wanted to make sure we did baby steps. And you can tell Ottawa or somebody else to do it bigger than us. So, anyways, we have an exciting. We're only going to do about an hour's worth at the most, because the whole idea of the whole idea of this meetup is for us to all talk to each other. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a quick speech. Max is going to do like a battle royal moderated panel between me and Adrian, which is going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. And then we're going to do some Q&As for anybody that wants to ask a question to any one of the 3 of us. Or not. And then after that, we're just going to wrap it up, and we're going to have just a meet and greet, food and beverages, and then stuff like that. So, all right. To start off, I want to sort of get you guys involved. So we're going to sort of do a hands up so we can sort of have a neat idea of like who's here. So how many, first of all, are here from Winnipeg? Okay. Now the easier one to find is how many are not from Winnipeg? Wow, okay, we got some non-Winnipeggers, so. I know one's from Steinbach. Okay, 2, there's one in the back too. So, yeah. Bev, we're gonna have to sort of ask for discounts.
Get another mic.
There. Hello, there, okay. And then now, the other question I'm gonna ask you, how many here are what you would call yourselves new DIY investors? And I say somebody that's only started in the last few months and are just starting to get wet behind the ears here. All right, so there's quite a few. That's quite a bit. I'm only 3 years myself, so I guess I'm not a newbie, but I'm 3 years, so I'm not like a 20-year veteran myself. So, all right. The next question I have. If you've watched my videos, you know that there's a spectrum of investor goals, from the growth all the way over to the extreme income. How many people here would call themselves growth investors? People that would invest in growth stocks, maybe dividends, but stuff like that. Okay. How many people here would say that they're hybrid investors, meaning that they're doing part of both? Okay, so that is likely the most common thing that's going to happen, because I don't think there's anybody that's doing anything that pure, but you know, they're still dabbling in the other side. So now the last one, how many are in the income investors, like the passive income and stuff like that that's happening right now? There we go. Yeah, there's a little bit. Okay, so it's actually an even blend. Like it wasn't too heavy on one way or too heavy on the other way. So that's really good to see. So. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm going to have Max come up first and enjoy this lovely microphone. And be ready to hit it 4 or 5 times. And then after that, we're going to get up on 3 on the panel, and we'll start doing our round robin thing. All right?
Cheers. Let's give a big round of applause for Perry. used to talk with like a very, very loud voice when I was in the Sound of Music when I was in like high school, and I was so proud of it. I could boom my voice so loud, and so I was like, I don't need a mic. But I sounded kind of ridiculous on stage because everyone else had a mic, and so I was just basically shouting. But hi guys, my name's Max. I'm the CEO of Blossom. Super pumped to be here in Winnipeg. Let's give one more awesome round of applause for Perry and the team for hosting this event. As Perry mentioned, this is a special event because it's the first one where all me and Adrian had to do is show up and enjoy the show. So it was nice, relaxing. We got to explore Winnipeg a bit. We walked around the forest. We went to the old spaghetti factory. It's my second time ever in Winnipeg. And last time I told a couple of you guys it was 8 years ago. In the middle of February. So the University of Winnipeg thought it was a great idea to host a bunch of other universities here for a conference in February, and I think everyone came and they're like, I never want to come to Winnipeg again. It was so cold. So they should have hosted it in the summertime, and I'm glad we came back because it's truly a beautiful city. And yeah, walking around by the river and everything. You guys are, as you mentioned, very blessed to be in such an amazing community. And it's amazing having basically 100 folks here from the biggest little city in Canada, all coming together with a shared passion for investing. And you know, one thing that I always love to talk about is that sort of concept of us coming together to talk about investing, to talk about money, because sometimes it can be a little taboo. If you tell your friend or your sibling, oh, I'm going to this event to talk about money, they kind of look at you and they say, okay, well, why are you so obsessed with money? But I think with all of us in our investing journeys, we've come to learn from both each other, from obviously the Blossom community, that investing is about so much more than money, right? It's about the goals we set, whether that's buying your first home, whether that's sending your kids to college, whether that's retirement, and investing is so intertwined with us, achieving those goals earlier, and nothing beats sort of coming together in a community to celebrate those goals, and essentially to prioritize our future over the present. And with, especially tonight with the Winnipeg Jets home open, the fact that you guys came here tonight and chose to talk about investing instead, big round of applause for you guys for doing that. Yeah. And hopefully we'll put the game on later as well. So that, and feel free, I won't be offended if while we're talking you're checking the score or you have the game up on the. Brandon does that sometimes. So it's quickly before we kick off the panel discussion, show of hands, how many of you folks are on Blossom already? Amazing, that's awesome. How many of you are not yet on Blossom or kind of hearing about it for the first time? Okay, so everyone got to swarm those three folks, tell them, get them on down. No, well, I'll address you guys. For those of you who don't know, Blossom is a social network for retail investors. So you can kind of think of the Facebook or Instagram of investing. And the reason that events like this are so important is because there's sort of like a in real life representation of what we're trying to do on the app. And nothing beats the in-person community. But the purpose of the app is we can have events like this, we can meet each other, we can share knowledge, and then tomorrow, if that doesn't have to end, we can continue to do that all throughout the year, hopefully until next year or maybe next month when we have the next Winnipeg meetup. So one more question for you guys before we kind of kick off the panel. Are any of you guys in the crowd shareholders of Blossom? Show of hands. Amazing, like kind of five, 6 of you, that's amazing. So fun fact is generally with startups or private companies, they traditionally only raise from venture capitalists or kind of rich investors, but we did something really unique with Blossom in that we actually raised capital from our users and from our community. So Blossom actually set the record for the most successful equity crowdfunding round in Canadian history. We raised $2.5 million in 6 hours from over 2,000 of our users, and that to me is essentially perfect for Blossom, because all of us, at the end of the day, Blossom is nothing without the community and without all of you guys, coming together, sharing knowledge, sharing this passion. And so for those of you guys who did invest, thank you truly from the bottom of my heart. For those who maybe are going to become shareholders later on, it's exciting. We get to share in the success all together. And even if you're not a shareholder, I really do view the wins of the community and the wins of Blossom as milestones to celebrate together. And just to quickly share, we've had some incredible milestones this year. For those of you guys who maybe saw on the app, maybe you didn't, but Apple ranked us one of the top 25 apps for 2025 here in Canada. We've now soared to over 500,000 users, and yeah, of course, the community backing was what made that possible. So thank you guys, and without further ado, I'm excited to dive into the panel. So yeah, I have two awesome guys joining me. Well, I guess I'm the one joining you, Perry, this time, but I'll introduce the one that I flew over with first. Joining me from Toronto, some of you guys might know him by his alias, but this YouTuber has taught millions of Canadians to build long-term wealth by breaking down investing and tax tips. He's even read the tax code, and more than that, as I'm sure you guys will get to see chatting with him after. He's one of the most humble and genuine guys I know. Let's give it up for Adrian, Canadian in a t-shirt. All right, and next up, oh, I got it stuck to my foot here. Next up, our homegrown Blossom creator, obviously the man behind the show tonight. This creator retired in 2023, converting his bank-managed pension portfolio into an income engine, and has broken down his playbook in an easy-to-follow way for the Blossom community, growing to over 9,000 followers now on Blossom and over 8,000 subscribers on YouTube. And I was talking to his wife and his daughter. They said never in a million years did they think he'd be a celebrity, but after chatting with him for lunch, I can see why, because Perry knows the stuff. He has such passion for not just his own investing, but for teaching the next wave of investors. So joining us all the way from Winnipeg, let's give it up for Perry.
Okay. We gave you the center seat.
Yeah, I'm going to trip myself on this cord here. All right, let me get the questions open. So, to kick it off, I always like to ask a bit of an icebreaker, and you kind of hinted to it there, Perry, around the different investing styles. Let's start by each of you guys sharing your investing style and your favorite holding. And maybe I'll turn it over to Adrian to kick it off.
Sure, thanks Max, and thank you everyone for coming here. This is actually my first time in Manitoba, first time in Winnipeg. I love the city so far. Unfortunately, we are leaving tomorrow morning, but I'm definitely going to come back. There's so much I want to see. We're driving past the Aviation Museum, the Human Rights Museum. I want to see the rivers that Perry was talking about, the forks. Like, there's so much I'm excited to see, so I'll definitely be back. But to answer Max's question, I have two fundamental pillars of my long-term wealth strategy. One of them is diversification. What that means is I never want to have all my eggs in one basket. I want to be spread out across different companies, different sectors, even different countries, right? That's my number one. And then number two would be focusing on a long-term mindset. I don't care what happens next week, next month, even next year. I care about long-term growth. I want to invest in quality companies that have a long-term future so that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, these companies are still going to be around, they're going to be profitable, and that's how I build my long-term wealth, by focusing on those two things. Now to answer Max's second question, which is what is my favorite holding, it's actually a pretty special answer. My favorite holding and my largest investment is Blossom Social. I was very lucky because I met Max and Brandon and the rest of the Blossom team almost 3 years ago now. I invested a sizable chunk of money in the company, not only because of I believed in Max's vision and the vision of the entire team, but Blossom really kind of exemplifies both of those principles I was talking about. One, diversification. There's nothing else like Blossom out there. It's like the first of its kind. So I can check that one off the box in terms of diversification. And number two, focusing on long-term growth. And again, I invested in Blossom when they only had 5,000 users. Now we're literally about to cross 500,000 users. And I look around this room and I really see, like, everyone here, you guys exemplify the long-term future of Blossom. The fact that we have such a strong and loyal and helpful community where it's not based on showing off or bragging or trying to sound smart to strangers online. It's just everyday people coming together, sharing the lessons they've learned, sharing their mistakes too, and helping helping each other out. And the fact that even someone like Perry, right? Like, I'm a YouTuber who joined Blossom. Perry is a Blossomer through and through. And the fact that, you know, I think this whole audience here and people like Perry really exemplify what I think we all believe Blossom could become. And I'm just so excited for the ride, and I want to see where we go through from here. So big round of applause to all of you guys as well.
Amazing. Thanks, Adrian. What about you, Perry?
Well, I can't beat that. So my side of the table is I'm really focused on income. So income, the reason is because I'm retired. So the focus for me is that I've moved my portfolio towards something that's the phase called consumption. So we know that when you have a portfolio, when you're doing investing, you have two phases. One is accumulation, and the second primary one is consumption. Being that I'm retired and my portfolio is paying all my bills, I had to move my portfolio to something that would be able to pay my bills on a monthly basis, reliably, consistently, and sustainably. I actually did look around when I just said I was, as you said, Max, I was in a bank managed fund, and it's like, this is not going to get me anywhere at 7% and stuff like that. So I started experimenting, and then I fell across my first covered call ETF. So it was really focusing on what I was looking for. So it was really the hammer when I had a nail and I needed something to be hammered. I was looking for income. And again, we all know who Adriano is. I've listened to his story, same thing. I listened to his history. He says, we looked for dividend yielding income, like the Enbridges and the Suncors that giving me that whopping 5 or 6%. And I was like, but that's just not going to do it for my portfolio. So when covered calls showed up, I'm sure anyone who's heard covered calls, they know they're going to say they're too good to be true. I was in the same boat back in 2023, but then I actually really went down, dug deep down. I actually did interviews with Hamilton, personally called them you heard all the bad stories about them and, oh, they do this and they erode and stuff. So I actually did research to say, look, this is God, if I'm going to put all my money into this, I better know that it works. And I did believe it, so I really started to do that. So right now my portfolio is 90% income investing. So, and of that income investing, it's all the derivatives-based passive income investing. I don't have any dividend generating, because dividend generating companies is an income source. It's a growth/income source. Covered call ETFs, they do have growth versions that basically do both, but their primary objective is income, and that's what I was looking for. So 90% of my portfolio is income sourced through derivatives-based high yield. The other 10% is pure growth. So yes, I do pure growth, even though I'm an income investor. And then, so the next question you asked me, and I think I already sort of alluded it to you guys, what is my favorite holding? I have 36 holdings. 3 of them are stocks. The rest of them are all covered call ETFs or some other forms like swap agreements and stuff like that. My favorite holding is one of my 3 growth stocks. So Athabasca is my #1 stock. It has been my darling child. I found it back in January when I was really getting into Suncor and all those ones, and this little mid-cap showed up called Athabasca. And I basically started researching it, and we talked about some of the fundamental metrics. It still to this day has been a rock star. It's generated me well over 60-70% in return on investment, and it just keeps doing it. So that is definitely my favorite. If I talked about the ones of my majority, which is the other 33 or 32, whatever the math is, my favorites amongst my majority of my holdings, which are my covered call ETFs, I would say there's one in particular that has been a 2025 rock star, which is Harvest's PLTE. It currently has an 88% return on investment right now, and that's not yield. Most of that is growth. So for those people that said that covered call ETFs don't grow, this is almost all growth and a little bit of income. But if I actually looked at what really is the one I would say long-term favor, I'm really enjoying several of the what's referred to as the all-in-ones. So you've heard of HHIS from Harvest, everyone knows what that one is, but they're all doing this. They're all starting to come out with this, WPay from Round Hill. So if I had to say which were my favorites, I like the all-in-ones because they're more diversified, they're not as radical, and they provide a nice consistent yield. And even amongst the ultra yielders, they're actually providing that. So that would be my favorite amongst the cover call ETFs. So.
Amazing, yeah, and for those of you who don't know, because I know a lot of people put up their hands as sort of beginner investors, PLTY is like a Palantir single stock covered call ETF. So what that means is it is essentially you're buying the company Palantir, and then the fund writes essentially an options strategy, which we won't. That's a more complicated topic, but more or less, like as you kind of alluded to, Palantir, the company has done sort of exceptionally well, and then the covered calls can also benefit sort of on the volatility. And Adrian, can I?
And it gives you income on it. And it gives you
Yes.
income.
Yeah. Can I switch?
Of course.
I've never sat in the middle, and it's throwing me off.
So now we have
I want to be able to see both of you guys here. And I guess, yes, now you guys can
You were keeping the peace before.
yeah, but, and then to zoom out even further, an ETF is essentially a bundle of stocks. So the one Perry mentioned, like HHIS, it holds a number of different companies as part of that ETF or exchange traded fund. And so anyway, that's the basics that I'll share. I know there's a lot of you folks who are more intermediate, so you're probably like heard this a million times, but I know some folks brought their sisters or their brothers or daughters, right, who are maybe just getting started. So I didn't have this one on the docket, but maybe as a first question, since there was a lot of beginners in the crowd, I want to ask, like, when you've been investing 3 years, you maybe 12.
Yeah.
What's something you guys wish you knew when you were getting started, as sort of a general principle, whether for new beginners or I think as a timeless lesson for investors even who've been doing it a long time?
Sean, start. Yeah.
So I'm actually, you talk to a lot of investors, and a lot of them like learn the mistakes the hard lessons the hard way. Like I got into investing because a coworker told me to buy this penny stock, and I got burnt. I lost all my money. Luckily, I never had that kind of inkling to kind of go swing for the fences with those risky penny stocks. So I don't really have too many like dramatic, giant losses that shake me in my sleep that I regret. More of my regrets have actually been in the investments that I didn't make. And I mentioned earlier that a key part of my investment strategy is diversification. Now, for the first, I would say 7 to 8 years of my investing career, I was exclusively invested in the Canadian market and the US market. Roughly 50-50 split, but that was it. I had no exposure to the European markets, the Asian markets, the emerging markets like we've seen in Brazil and Taiwan and India and so forth. And that was a lot of lost opportunity there. And so for me, one of the lessons that I wish I had done from the beginning was have a little bit of exposure into those international markets as well as the emerging markets. Now, still, I wouldn't recommend making that a big priority. Like for me, my number right now is about 40% Canadian, 40% US, and then about 20% in international, but don't neglect the international markets. Yes, you're probably going to see a little bit more of a bumpy road, a lot more unpredictability because, now you're dealing with potentially smaller companies, but potentially more unstable governments, changing government regulations, changing international trade deals, global conflicts, right? So there's definitely more uncertainty there compared to the Canadian-US market, but there's also huge potential for growth. And we've already seen that, especially over the past, I would say, 10, 15 years. And I'm sorry to say that I missed out on a lot of that growth, but I'm not going to make that same mistake anymore. So from now on, I'm always putting about 20% into the international markets.
I have something to quickly add to that, because you also mentioned, Perry, kind of with Athenbaskets, when we were having lunch, like the PE ratio. And so for those of you guys who don't know, the PE ratio, price earnings ratio, it's probably even if you're just getting started, it's a good metric to know. It's essentially a measure of how expensive a company is. So it takes the price that it's trading at and it compares it to its earnings or essentially its profits. And so you were mentioning Athabasca, one of the reasons you like the stock, it had like a 9x PE ratio, which is considered really low compared to other companies. I think NVIDIA is like 35 or such, Palantir even higher. And then I actually bought ETF ZEA, which is a international ETF, after sort of looking at the fact that international markets in general trade at like a very low PE compared to the S&P 500. So you might see news articles about how the S&P 500, which is the US market, is trading at a very high PE right now. And so that's sort of, I'm also looking more at international markets because I view it as sort of comparatively like on sale compared to maybe the US market. So it can adapt over time. Sometimes the international markets might be looking expensive and the Canadian market or other markets might be on sale. But that's kind of a good, I think it's, even if you're just getting started, I always like to look at that metric. So I'll turn it to you, Perry. What's a lesson you kind of learned as you were getting started?
Okay, so with me, I don't have that 12-year history you have. So you can go back 12 years and say, yeah, in 12 years of me investing, the problem I've had was, and again, I'm sure many of you other investors are the same way. You've basically gone to your bank, you've given them your $1,000, they put it into their mutual fund, and you'll talk to them in another month. So the biggest problem there was I didn't have any investment experience. I just basically trusted the banks to do their things, or the investment companies, and they'll take care of me. I'll pay my MER and stuff like that. So if there was a mistake, I would say I might have rethought, is to explore and be brave enough to explore investing earlier. Yeah. Like, don't sit there and, again, honestly, I look at the bank managed funds, and again, you've got to remember, they're there to help you. For the people that are the convenient, I don't know anything about investing, I just want to do that, just make me retire when I have some money when I retire. But I really wish I would have actually started exploring earlier. Like, I did have that inkling to do it, but it's just like, I'll do it another time. But I mean, honestly, I finally got the urge enough in 2022 to say, this isn't good. I mean, at the end of the day, they talk about you need $1 million to retire. First of all, that's wrong. You need whatever it takes for your lifestyle to match your portfolio. Yeah. So there's no hard number if you're going to retire on $1 million. But the big point is I knew that at 7%, under $1 million, it was not going to be a nice ride for my retirement. It would be, okay, I could pay my bills and stuff, but will I be able to do maybe a trip around the world or anything, like the freedom of retirement? I felt that I wanted more of that. And then I looked at also what they were saying with regards to, okay, Perry, now you're getting close to retirement, let's talk about that meltdown strategy. So hopefully if we do this and we move our foot the right way and your CPP comes out at the right time at this, you should have enough money left that we should have drained all your RSPs and RIFs and stuff by age 90. And I was like, that bothered me. Like, that honestly bothered me. It's like, I don't want to know if I'm going to just make it. I want to know that I can fly to the end and at the end of the day leave a legacy for my loved ones behind. So if I had to say, I wish I would have taken more time to actually be brave enough to actually look at DIY investing. Yeah. Even if you don't think that you have the experience to do it. Well, this dude over here just created a company that will teach you. If you don't know how to do it, they'll show you. There's 1,000 other people that will show you. Like, oh, well, again, it happens to me even at Blossom. It's like, I still learn things every day on Blossom. It's like, oh, I didn't know that there was a tax shelter for that. It's like, oh yeah, no, you can't do it that way. Like, so just having the community talk to each other, by osmosis, you basically start learning about DIY investing. You can ask the dumb questions because it's not a dumb question for the other half of the population. And the other thing that Blossom gave me, and if you want to move away from the banks doing your work and you want to become a DIY investor, even just sit in Blossom and don't invest. Sit in Blossom and learn. And just soak it up. And then the other thing you get from that is the amount of support you get. And we talked about this at lunch. It's like, there's no ego thing. You'll say that, hey, I reached $1,000 this month in my dividends, and you get 8, 9, 100 people turn around and say, hey, what a go, you did it. So you get that support that you just don't get in your real world because most of your other people around you just don't care that you just made $1,000. First of all, like you said, it was usually embarrassing to tell people that you're talking about finances. Well, in Blossom, you could be a DIYer and be proud of it. So that would be what I would say would be my biggest regret is that there wasn't a Blossom 8 years ago. So
Why did you start earlier?
yeah, why did you start early?
Can I jump in?
Yeah, I'll jump with two quick things. Yeah, so Perry made an excellent point. Doesn't matter where you are on the journey. You could be a beginner, you could be a veteran, doesn't matter. You're always going to be learning. Warren Buffett famously said he still reads like 3 hours a day, and he's learning something every day. I've been investing for 12 years. I'm literally like an online educator teaching people how to invest. Perry taught me things today at lunch. You know, like I'm always learning as well. And with Blossom, like, you know, to Perry's point, don't be afraid to like ask questions. Like, I guarantee you, you may think it's a silly question, or like, oh, I feel embarrassed to say. If you're thinking it, there's 100 other people who are thinking the exact same question. Have the courage to just ask that question. The community is so welcoming. Dozens of people will jump in and help you out, and then get a good discussion flowing. And to Perry's earlier point about, you know, his regret being like, start with mutual funds. I was the same way. I think Max might have been the same way too. We all started with mutual funds because the vast majority of Canadians are invested in mutual funds exclusively. Because that's kind of been the overarching narrative for decades. Investing is so scary. You have to leave it to the experts, whatever that means, right? And that's why you have to trust the banks and buy mutual funds. We'll do all the work for you, and we'll take a little bit of fees. But if you, like, for me, the real light bulb moment was probably about a year and a half to 2 years into my mutual fund journey, which is where I started. I actually opened up the annual statements and the quarterly statements, and I scrolled down. I think it might have been all buried all the way to page number 37. That's where I saw how much fees I was paying. And when you see that number, it's not 2% of your profits. No. It's 2% of the full amount. Whether they make you money or lose you money, they still take their cut, right? So for me, and if you guys are still in mutual funds, you know, and again, I hope you guys have a good fund manager and your portfolio's been doing well, but regardless, go through the statements and see exactly how much fees they're taking. Because I guarantee you can find an ETF portfolio which is almost equivalent, like the same underlying holdings, and it will be a fraction of the fees. And when I say a fraction, I literally mean 10 times, 20 times, even 30 times cheaper. So don't underestimate those fees, and you know, don't be afraid to ask those questions and have those difficult conversations with your bank or with your financial advisor. Remember, you're paying them. They have to do their job and actually teach you and answer your questions. And if they are teaching you, then great, maybe you want to stick with them. But for me, I only met my bank's fund manager once when I opened the account. And then for 2 years, I never had any communication with them. So what was I paying them 2% for, right? So it's your money. Make sure you're not throwing away money in fees. And if you are paying someone, make sure you're getting your money's worth and asking those questions.
100%. And I love how much you guys are plugging Blossom because I don't have to. But just to add to that, because we're going to get into like a little bit more deeper and complicated topics. But the final thing I'll say for the more beginners is like investing is a spectrum, right? Like it can be very, very complicated, but it can also be very, very simple. And so like if you're just starting out, there's so many essentially basically products or things like you can invest in, like an asset allocation ETF. So Brandon, some of you guys, did anyone know Brandon Beavis? Show of hands or follow him. So he used to pick stocks and essentially choose different companies. Then he had 2 kids. His life got busy. He's working obviously as one of our amazing co-founders at Blossom. He switched essentially entirely into ZEQT, which is the asset allocation ETF, because it's kept it like super, super simple for him. So it's for folks who are starting out, there's things, as Adrian said, which almost like can mirror like exactly what the mutual fund is doing. If you actually look at like what a lot of ETF providers, like actually they make an ETF and they make a mutual fund, and they're like basically the exact same thing because the mutual fund has higher fee. Like pretty much like they're identical. They hold the same companies, except one is higher fee. So the one thing I'll say is as we get into the deeper concepts, don't get intimidated by it. Think of it as like the next level, like level 2, level 3, level 4. But you don't need to know all those things to get started, and you shouldn't let it the complexity that investing can have be a hindrance. And even Adrian and I were friends with a creator named Shay, the humble trader. She does day trading. neither of us, I don't think any of us do day trading. It's way too complicated. I look at her screen, I'm like, this looks like
terrifying.
yeah, but that doesn't stop us from investing, right? So we've talked a lot about varying strategies, and so I know, Adrian, you're more stock oriented, 65% into stocks in your TFSA. Perry, you're more passive income focused, mostly in the passive income ETFs. Can you talk about how you came to that strategy? I know it's somewhat similar to the previous question I asked, and then how you think investors should kind of think about their own strategy. And sure, yeah.
So I'll try to keep my answer brief and short. But so in my TFSA, it's definitely dividend dominated. I do a lot of high yield dividend stocks, dividend ETFs, as well as REITs, real estate investment trusts, which pay out high distributions, effectively dividends in the real estate sector. And the reason why I do that in my TFSA and in my RSP is for tax efficiency, because in those tax sheltered accounts, all that income is tax free. Whereas in my non-registered accounts, that's where I'm more on the growth focus. I focus more on capital gains because capital gains is so much more tax efficient. Literally, it's taxed at half the rate of regular income, right? And another benefit is, if I'm holding a growth stock like Nvidia that doesn't pay dividends, right? And I hold a stock for 10 years, I don't pay $1 in taxes until I sell 10 years later. So that's kind of the breakdown between my tax sheltered accounts and my non-registered accounts. Now, asking about how I allocate individual stocks versus ETFs versus dividends, it's definitely more of an art form than a science, and there are some general principles to follow. But the main strategy that I follow is the core satellite approach. Basically means that my backbone, my foundation of my portfolio is in diversified, broad market ETFs. So I'm not trying to beat the market, I just want to match the Canadian market, the US market, and different indices in the international markets. That's my core. Those ETFs I can buy, rain or shine, no matter what's going on, bull market, bear market, winter, summer, doesn't matter. I can buy those ETFs with my eyes closed. Now, on top of that, I can supplement those broad market ETFs with individual stocks. Those are the companies where I kind of want to double down on, because I believe this company in particular has a bright future ahead, 10 years, 20 years down the line. And I want to, and even if I own that stock, that company in those ETFs, I still want to kind of double down and buy some individual stocks. And now how you split that up is going to vary person to person. For me, again, I would say the majority of my portfolio, maybe between 55 and 60% is in ETFs. The rest is going to be those individual stocks, some growth stocks, some dividends, some real estate stocks, and it also depends on where you want to put them, right? Different account types have different tax implications. But one thing I will say is that I never want to be, too overly concentrated on any one company. Even my favorite company in the world, right? It could be a bank stock, it could be a tech stock, doesn't matter. I never want to have more than 8% of my overall portfolio in any given stock. Because, we've seen even like giants in the stock market fall, right? We've seen what happened to Nortel and Enron and Blockbuster, right? Who would have predicted that 20 years from now those companies wouldn't exist, right? That's a hard bet, that's a hard future to imagine. So even my favorite stock that I have the utmost conviction in, my number is 7 to 8%. Because hey, if something catastrophic happens and that stock goes to zero, sure, it's gonna hurt me, but I'll only lose 8%. I can survive off of that. So that's why for me, diversification is the number one priority whenever I'm thinking about how to allocate my investments.
It's funny you say, because a lot of the stuff you said, pretty much I say the same thing on the income side.
Yeah.
Right? So I can't say any much more than he's already said with regards to diversification. Anyone that's watched my YouTube videos, I have 3 primary goals. The one is to maximize income, monthly income. The second one is to continually annually grow my monthly income, at minimum at inflation rate, but better would be better. And my third goal is to reduce any risk to mitigate risk wherever possible. The only way you can mitigate risks in the investment in the investment world is to diversify. Yeah. Because exactly what Adrian said, mine's even actually less than his. His is 7%. My benchmark is 5%. So I basically say that unless there's a reason for me to veto that 5% is the maximum that any one of my holdings have. Now, I'm all income, so my focus is trying to generate the maximum amount of income. So where you focused on growth and dividend stocks, because you're mostly still doing accumulation, and you're still focusing on the idea of that asset growth. Mine's on income growth. So with income growth, there honestly is no, again, the funny part is about this is that they say like, well, when you're a youth, you shouldn't be investing in incomes, you should be doing growth. You should be a growth investor when you're young, when you're a retiree, you should switch to income. And that was a very wise statement at the time when the only income assets you had available to you were 1 to 2 to 5% yielding assets. You only had bonds, GICs, and treasuries. Well, of course, it absolutely made sense. But honestly, the covered call industry has basically turned the investment community on its ear. You've now got income generating assets that are rivaling equities in ROI. And so that premise is sort of changing. And the reason I've now focused on covered call ETFs is because I need to maximize that income. And the only tools that will do that is the covered call ETFs. And the reason I come up with it because it's all based on a formula. So if you've been following, if you do know when you go into retirement and you do a growth strategy, the three of us talked about this briefly this afternoon. When you do a growth strategy and you're basically retiring and you have to now move into what's called the consumption stage, there's a lot of complexities in a growth strategy moving into a consumption stage. This is where a financial advisor does become very valuable because in order to make sure that you erode your growth strategy effectively to last up to they use the age 90 as the benchmark. You got to make sure you have investments to age 90. You have to take advantage of things such as they call it cash wedges. You have to have that 4% rule, meaning you want to make sure you're not draining away from your account as much as you're actually letting it grow to try to hold it stable as much as it can. It still will go down, but at least it will hold it until age 90. I had to do the same kind of thing with the income side, but an income strategy works totally different than a growth strategy. Because you're not selling any assets and you're generating income, I had to try to come up with a way of what happens if you're in down markets, because you were doing the same thing that I'm doing. At the end of the day, you're diversifying not for the good days, you're diversifying for the bad days.
100%.
Because, and you're going to ask me this question later, so I'll maybe hold it. But at the end of the day, the strategy is basically you diversify to make sure that your portfolio is sustainable, good days and bad days.
Yeah.
So the reason I'm bringing that up now is the reason I use covered call ETFs is because where in the growth portfolio they use things called cash wedges to hold money available for those bad days. In an income portfolio, it's a different way around. What you do is you say, I know how much I need on a monthly basis. So for me, I set a benchmark as in order for me to live comfortably and buy that car if I want and go on trips, I need $10,000 a month. I don't need 10,000, but 10 is a nice comfortable number. So what I do in my strategy is I say expenses times 3. And the reason I do, that's actually very, very big. Like I could have done expenses times 2, but expenses times 3. So I have to make sure I have a portfolio that generates 3 times my average monthly living expenses, because when the bubble bursts and the markets go down 20%, yeah, the NAVs will drop, but so will the distributions drop. So where I may be generating right now 35, 40,000, I got to know that if it goes down 20%, I can, okay, now I'm at 25,000 or 20,000. So in an income portfolio, you use things like earning income and getting it up high enough that when it comes down, it stays still above your living expenses until the markets come back up.
Yeah.
So that's sort of what my strategy is. That's why the only way I could do that is through covered call ETFs. I could not use dividend stocks because their yield is so low that I would have had to have a $4 million portfolio to do it. I only had $1 million to work on, and so I had to make sure I had that number. And a portfolio with covered call ETFs can give you that yield and give you that income and that security on there. So that's what I've done. 10%, so I said 90% is my covered call ETFs. The other 10% is my growth. I'll call it my play money. So I do growth stocks. I have 3 growth stocks. Literally, they are all in my non-registered for the same reason, because their own purpose is that they'll gain capital capital gains, they have no income. One of them is my Rockstar, which we already talked about. Two of them are penny stocks, and they're literally, I put them in there saying, I'm going to buy at this low number, and if in a year from now this thing becomes the next Athabasca, I'll be laughing. If not, whatever. But because I use diversification, I'm allowed to dabble like that. And this is, Adriano and I, we have different philosophies on this, even though we totally believe in the same strategy. He's taking the more moderate income investing approach, which is great on him. It's a very solid strategy. He doesn't have to worry about volatility, so he doesn't have to be as diversified as I have to be, because he invests in only like 5 or 6, I don't know what number he's at right now, but he's picking all index-based cover call ETFs. Ones that, like you said, if they're broad sector or if they're index-based, they're not going to go anywhere. Yeah, they'll go down to 5% or whatever. They'll go with the markets. But he's never going to worry about it going down to nothing. Yeah. And he doesn't invest in ultra yielders. I took a different approach because he's a conservative income investor. I'm what's called a growth income investor, meaning I want to have my yields at the 35% level. He's likely running at about the 20-25% level. In order to do that, I have to diversify a lot greater. And when I can diversify, I have a whole set of cores. With the cores protecting my base, I can now experiment with the ultra yielders. The one that, okay, I'm going to do another one at 35%. I'm going to do a 50% yielder. Because as you said, Adrian, if that one is 3% target weight, and for some reason something goes wrong with it, I lost 3%. Mm-hmm. If in the more likely scenario it's doing its job, I'm gaining a 50% yield on my portfolio. And I'll tell you right now, for the most part, most of my ultra yielders have been generating exactly what they want. If one falls off the pipe, it's the loss I took versus all the gains I had. So that's sort of my approach, is more the very, like you said, very broad spectrum, very, very diversified, and it allows me to focus on those cover calls in a broad spectrum area. So, right? Yeah. Do you want to add anything?
I'll add one little thing. So one thing, he mentioned Adriano. If anyone's confused, Adriano and Adrian are two different people. I'm Adrian, Canadian teacher. Adriano is passive income investing. He's probably, correct me if I'm wrong, he's probably the OG cover call. Yeah. He's like the go-to guy about cover call ETFs in Canada, but also around the world. One thing Perry did say that I want to push back a little bit. You said that in order to retire without kind of cutting down your portfolio, cover calls is the only way to do it. It's not strictly speaking the only way, but to your point, you are correct that if you were to have a more reasonable dividend portfolio and a mix of those stocks, you would have to kind of do a lot of work planning out how you're going to sell them down, how you're going to shift things around, rebalancing so that you have income and profits through sales coming in without affecting your overall portfolio value. But that does require work and planning, and maybe even talking to a financial planner or tax professional. What to Perry's point is that one of the benefits of covered calls is that they kind of do a lot of that work for you, right? And that's where you get that monthly income. But again, this is mainly more focused on if you're in the stage of life where income is a priority, right? When you're in the accumulation space, which is where I'm at, it doesn't really, it's still an option, but there are better ways to kind of build that, to accumulate that long-term wealth. But once you already have that multi-6-figure or 7-figure portfolio, and now you really want to prioritize income, cover calls is literally designed for that. And there's many great options out there.
Yeah, 100%. I think, and to your point, that's exactly why cover calls are especially popular with people who are in retirement, because we talk a lot even in Toronto about the psychological hurdles people have in selling. Like so much of investing is psychology. And so it actually becomes quite difficult for people to sell when they're that age. And so it's interesting. And one other thing that I'll comment on is it's funny, we've kind of talked about almost growth versus income. But to your point, Perry, you're actually very growth focused in the sense that HHIS is a very tech focused ETF. It has covered calls on it, of course, but the actual stocks and companies it's holding are tech stocks. PLTY, Coney, Palantir, Coinbase, right? So it's we were talking about this, me and Adrian, is like even on Blossom, sometimes it's like X versus Y, or like growth versus income. But at the end of the day, like I don't think from my perspective, I I wouldn't want to get confused by that, and make sure you know, like, what are the actual companies that you're buying? What's the actual sector that you're investing in behind it? And you know, the reason why, you know, some of these stocks or single stock ETFs can have high yields is because the stock is, you know, a very volatile stock. Like Palantir is a very volatile stock. So it is, you are obviously taking on the risk of that underlying company. Like one that I purchased, HHL, I bought because I wanted to invest in healthcare, right? So it was actually, the income wasn't the important part for me. I was like, okay, I want a healthcare focused fund. So you guys covered so much, so I'm sharing my 2 cents, I guess. But do you have something you want to add, Perry, or should I jump in there?
Yeah. One quick thing, you brought up a very good point. Because even in the cover call ETF space, you said it right, and I'm going to say, we should be proud to be Canadian, because at the end of the day, the Canadian cover call industry dominates the maturity of cover call ETFs. I actually found this fact out just this week, is that there are more Canadian cover call ETFs than there are American. We were the first to invent ETFs. We were first to invent cover call ETFs. We were also the first to actually introduce leverage into our cover call. It's the Americans that are always chasing us with a lot of our ideas. And so honestly, the nice thing about the Canadian cover call ETFs is not only do they do it first and come up with new innovative ideas, but they also do it with a sense of that Canadian conservatism, which is basically, they give you income, but they also, and it's not just Harvest, Hamilton, Evolve, you look at all of the Canadian main players here, they're giving you income generating cover calls with amazing growth. I mean, PLTE, 80% yield, 80% ROI, and most of it is not yield. Most of it is actually growth. They do it because they actually do a proper blending between where they write their contracts and where they're not writing their contracts. So that's why it's very safe and very good if you want to even get into them and want to be what's called a conservative income investor. There are so many options right now on the table in the Canadian market space. And again, I'm a YouTuber, which is, I'm getting a lot of Americans. And I'm telling you, the number one question I keep getting on my YouTube is from the Americans saying, what's available in the US space? Like, you guys have all these amazing ETFs. What do you recommend in the US space? And I'm struggling giving them an answer on that. So anyway, so I'm glad you brought that up, because there are growth cover call ETFs. So.
I'll echo that sentiment. So, I mean, I've been investing long enough where I've seen the huge explosion of ETF products. And like right now in 2025, coming to 2026, we as Canadians are so blessed to have this many options. So when I started investing, there were still ETFs out there, but they were not well known, and there weren't too many like online, public, free resources to kind of teach you these things. And now, whatever your strategy is, like Max just mentioned, you want a healthcare exposure. That's a very specialized sector. There are dozens of ETF designed exactly for that. Any kind of need you want, any kind of curiosity you want in a particular industry, in a particular geography, a particular sector, you'll find ETFs across dozens or dozens of ETF providers across the country that will find that solution for you. But remember, there's 2 things to always remember. Look at the fees, right? Because the more specialized you get, the more work is involved on the ETF side, and thus the higher the fees will be. And number 2, remember, we're talking cover calls, whether we're talking about options, whether we're talking about just standard ETFs, there's nothing really magic there. Fundamentally, what really matters is that you're holding underlying stocks. And what does that mean? It means you are owning a portion of a company. So make sure these are a good company that you see a long-term future in. My rule is basically this, like, if I don't want to own this company 20 years from now, I don't want to own it at all. I don't want to own it for a week or two. Like, it's not, every stock that I buy, whether it's through ETFs or individual stocks directly, this means that I'm proud to own this company. I see a long-term future in this company, and I want to see it continue to grow, and I want to keep investing in that company. Whether you do that through individual stocks, or ETFs, or even cover calls, always remember that principle. There's no like hand-waving thing here. It's literally you're buying an ownership of a company, so make sure it's a quality company with a bright future. That's the number one thing.
Amazing. That's a great principle, and I had a ton of other great questions, but we've already hit time. So I'm going to hint at them because since it's a small crowd, I'm going to hint at if you want to talk more about any of these things. Perry, I was gonna ask Perry around the myths of covered call ETFs, yield, other things that you check. So make sure you talk with him after the panel if you want to dive into that. Adrian, I was going to ask you about taxes. I was going to ask you about your thoughts on the market. But it's a small crowd, and we can have those combos like in small circles. So let's wrap up there, and let's give a huge round of applause to Perry and Adrian for an awesome panel. And we want to do like an open Q&A, but should we do group photo before or after? Maybe after. After. Okay, sweet. Well, let's open it up for questions for you guys. I have infinite questions, so I always have to contain myself. But yeah, we'll do a bit of open Q&A, then we'll do group photo, and then we'll enjoy the coffee and the sandwiches and together. So anyone want to kick it off with the first question? I mean, I don't know if the mic will stretch. Maybe just try and ask. It's a small room, I think. Yeah. Do you want to try and? Yeah. Let's see if we can hear you.
So you're in your consumption phase where you're drawing from your portfolio. I'm assuming, or like, you have assets in your RSP, TFSA, and non-reg. Where are you pulling that income from? Is it across all three? Is it the majority in one of those?
Yeah, I should have answered that because you did identify which accounts rolling. So I think I was going to say this: the old me, the current me should thank the old me for what I did, because what I was doing when I was buying all these bank mutual funds, they were always going into my RSPs. So my RSPs were building up, and of course then I maxed out that, so I started putting into my spousal RSPs. So my RSPs were building up. I had a LIF or a LIRA because I had a company pension, and then my wife and I made the decision when I retired that we would commute it. So a big chunk of my pension went into my LIRA. So right now, I'd say about 80% of all my covered call ETFs are in my RIFs. First of all, my RSPs, I converted them all to RIFs as soon as I retired. So I have 3 RSPs and 1 LIF. So all my covered calls are in there. So they are all tax sheltered. I can do whatever I want with them. I can sell them, I can buy them. I don't have any ACB on it. It's a blessing because I can do anything I want inside my RIFs. They can generate income, they can grow. And the nice thing about them being in the RIFs and the LIF is that I get to govern my tax strategy. I get to say, I think this year we'll pay 30% tax. So if you do that, then I just basically I call my broker and say, for 2026, increase my RIFs to $2,000 a month. And then they just basically, $2,000 a month comes out of my RIFs. So, and my TFSAs are the other 25%. Again, I think it was the biggest blessing the Canadian government ever gave investors is to give them the TFSA. Anyone who has not maxed out their TFSA better be maxing out their TFSA. It is the #1 gift. And it's not only a gift for us retirees. I know we talked about those people that were doing the FIRE strategy. Oh, yeah. If you guys don't know what the FIRE strategy is, financial independence, retire early. So Adriano is a poster child example of that. So because of TFSAs, you now can actually do something like FIRE. And my daughters, if you've been watching my Blossom posts, my daughters have been I've been getting their TFSAs maxed out as much as I can to help them out. Because literally, they can now generate the income on a monthly basis, $2,000 a month. They can pull it out tax-free. That money basically on January 1 becomes available to be put back in again. So for anyone doing younger investors that want to do FIRE, TFSAs are a god. For me, I have both. So I max them out on there and I do my RIFs. So I get to manipulate my income strategy and my tax strategy because I'm blessed that all my covered calls are in there. For those that don't have that, unfortunately they got to put their covered calls inside a non-reg and then they're taxed right away. Yeah. So now, again, you pay me now, you pay me later, it's going to get you one way or another, but the benefit is that with a RIF I can govern how fast I bring the money out, and now I just have to decide how fast I want to pull that out.
Is that taxed at ordinary income?
Anything coming out of a RIF is taxed as ordinary income. It's like employment income, but it's not employment income, but it's regular income tax. Yeah.
And that's the only income you have in your life?
Other than CPP, I'm already pulling up my CPP. Again, some people will tell you not to do that, but even my bank manager said the only way you would want to pull your CPP out earlier is if you can assure that you're generating growth greater than 7% a year, because that means you can literally use that money and grow something bigger. So, and I said, well, I'm doing more than 7, so I'm at 37%, so I think I can beat 7. So yeah, so my CPP is the only other thing. My entire portfolio is self-funded. I've been living off my entire portfolio since November of 2023. And I cannot contribute to it. So if everyone says, oh yeah, you're doing that good because you're contributing to it, you can't contribute to a RIF, and my TFSA is maxed out. So I'm self-funded. It's my RIFs that are paying me. I'm not paying my RIFs. So I gotta jump in. Yeah, go ahead.
So whenever there's a tax question, I get way too excited. I have to jump in here. So I echo a lot of the things that Perry just said, and he's absolutely right. In 2009, when the TFSA came out, that was like a blessing from above from the government. So they deserve credit there. But we've also got another blessing, even more powerful debatably, 2 years ago with the brand new FHSA, the First Home Savings Account. And so yeah. Oh no!
So I think you're loud enough.
I can probably do that. Let's see. Hello? Yeah, excellent. Yes, so general principles here. Like I have a whole video about which account to prioritize, TFSA versus FHSA versus RSP. It's again, it is going to depend on different scenarios, right? And Perry's absolutely right. With the TFSA, the benefit there is that it's so flexible. There are literally no downsides. Our RSP can be even more powerful than the TFSA if you use it right and if you're in the right conditions for it. But if you don't use it right, RSP can actually hurt you. Whereas TFSA, no matter who you are, you will benefit from it. Now with the FHSA, the First Home Savings Account, that one's even more powerful than the TFSA as long as you're planning to buy a home to live in, a principal residence, as long as you're planning to buy a home within the next 15 years. If that's you, so if you're going to buy a home in the next 15 years, then you should prioritize the FHSA above the TFSA. The reason for that is, with the FHSA, you get all of the tax sheltered benefits of the TFSA, meaning the money grows tax-free and you can withdraw it tax-free as long as you're buying a home. And on top of that, you also get the best benefits of the RRSP, meaning all the money you contribute, $8,000 a year, that will reduce your taxable income. And depending on your tax bracket, let's say you're in a 40% tax bracket, if you contribute $8,000 to your FHSA, you'll save yourself maybe $3,000, $3,500 on your tax bill, which you wouldn't get that benefit with the TFSA. So, again, it is going to depend on situations. If you already own a house, you're not eligible for the FHSA, unfortunately. But yes, if you're younger, you're in the accumulation phase, prioritize the FHSA, prioritize the TFSA, and then after that, there's also other options like RESP if you have kids. You want to maximize that 20% free government grant money. Or RSP can be even more powerful if you are in a high income tax bracket and you expect to be in a lower income in retirement. And then once all the tax sheltered rooms are maxed out, then you go into non-registered. And that's where you have to be a little bit more mindful of, all the profits you make will be taxed, whether it's capital gains, interest income, or dividends.
And the complexity of ACB for things like covered calls.
I've got a question here. Yeah. Just say for a First Home Saving account, and then you use it once, but your account's still open. Can you still put it, like, you bought a house, right? But can you still invest into it after you use it? But it's open before you even buy the house.
So you opened it,
yeah, and
then you bought a house, but you didn't use the money. You didn't use all the money for it.
You still have a lot of room. Yeah, you still have a lot of room, but you didn't before.
Oh no, so let's say you opened 2 years ago and you put in $16K and it grew to $20K because your investments did well. If you're buying a home, pull out the full $20K amount. Like, don't leave anything in there, because once you buy a home, you can't use it again. You're not going to be able to buy another first home.
Yeah, so my bank told me that you should still invest into it. If you still use it for it.
What's your bank? So we don't.
I wouldn't recommend that, because here's the thing. So the best benefit of the FHSA is that you can withdraw it tax-free, which you don't get that benefit with an RSP. However, you only get that tax-free withdrawal if you're using it to buy a home. If you've already bought a home, or if you decide to never buy a home, you can convert the FHSA into an RRSP. So I always tell people, like, the absolute worst case scenario with the FHSA, you never buy a home, the FHSA basically becomes $40,000 of extra RRSP room. But that's now becomes an RRSP now, meaning you will have to pay taxes on it. Ideally in retirement when you're in a low income tax bracket. But, sorry, did you already buy a home?
Yes,
How long ago was it?
last year.
Last year. So with the FHSA, you don't have to like it's not like you need to withdraw the money exclusively for the down payment. You can also use that money for moving costs, land transfer taxes, commission fees. Now, if it's been over a year, I think it's a bit of a yellow flag to withdraw it. You know what I would do? I would probably, talk to an accountant if you have one, call the CRA and tell them exactly your situation and say, hey, look, I know that I'm a little bit late. I already bought a home a year ago, but this is a new account, and I maybe just say, throw your bank under the bus and say, like, I got some bad information, bad advice. Can I still withdraw this money tax-free and use it for some of my, home expenses?
I did pull that for the house.
Yes.
But what I want to know is the account's still open.
Can you put more money in? No, don't do that anymore. Yeah, so from now on, focus on PIIverse and RRSP.
No, I also use that in conjunction with my first home.
The home buyer's plan, yes, which is exactly what you want to do, yeah. But now, for you, the FHSA is dead, right? You can look at it saying like, oh, I didn't get to maximize the full 5 years of room, but you still saved a lot of money on your taxes and you're able to buy a home with it, which is really the main point, the main objective.
But the thing is, there's still a little bit amount of money in there, so I don't know why. I mean, we did it in Real Simple and
Yes.
Real Bank in the first home saving account. Does that reflect them to say, oh, you still have your first home saving account?
No, so that's what I'm saying. I would call CRA and say, look, I still have X amount, let's say $5,000 in the FHSA. I already bought the home a year ago. I would say, look, I know I'm a year late to this. Can I still withdraw this money and put it towards home expenses and keep that tax-free benefit? See what they say. I hope they'll say yes. But for you, if it was a couple of months, it would be no problem. If it's been a year, we'll see what they say.
I think what happened was I tried to withdraw it out full, and then during the middle of the month I got dividends or something I sold, and then just added to it after when they clear it out. So
Right.
there's still some in there. But
It's not going to be a whole lot of money, but we can talk after.
Yeah. This is what happens when you ask Adrian or Perry a tax question. It could be an hour long. Maybe we'll do, in interest of time, let's do one more question, and then we'll wrap it up. Yeah.
Perry, I was going to ask, is there any information that is information to share with us on your conversations with the fund manager when you were at the Toronto Blossom event?
With our partners.
Which one? Like,
Any of the conversations that you had with the fund managers, was there any nuggets of information you can share with us, anything you learned?
Nothing like amazingly or shocking. I did have the conversation with Hamilton way back when I first took up my decision on cover calls. And the good part with them is they did answer a lot of the good questions with regards to, well, what's this thing about rock and the return on investment? And this is where they explained that, well, there's things called good rock and bad rock, and people got to understand some rock is called, most rock that comes out of cover calls is more of an accounting classification by the government. So I don't know one cover call ETF that doesn't generate some form of rock. The bad rock is erosion, true erosion, and there are examples of that, but they did a good job explaining what that is. From 3 weeks ago, there wasn't really anything too shocking. They wouldn't tell me if there was something that was like non-disclosure, because they would be in trouble doing it anyway. So, but no, the good part is that they are all competitive. Like Harvest and Evolve and Hamilton and BMO, they're very competitive. They're watching each other like a hawk. So the good thing right now is like Harvest seems to be quite the leader in some new innovative ideas, but then Evolve will come and say, okay, great, so you got HHSS, I got Biggie, and I'm doing it 5% more. So now that puts the pressure now on Harvest to say, well, okay, they're doing it through leverage, we may not like leverage as much, we're gonna have to figure out another way of doing it. So the good part is you're gonna likely see a lot of neat, extra innovative space in the Canadian cover call market, because now Harvest is gonna say, but we don't like going too far in leverage, but we gotta figure another way of getting back up to a number that's close to Biggie. So that's what you're gonna see, is they're gonna keep telling you, please stand by, because we've got neat ideas coming down the pipe.
I have a question. She's been raising her hand since.
Okay.
So let's put some
Yeah.
because you don't seem to see us here.
I did.
Right? Okay, you go ahead.
So my question is this, and I'm very new. I often watch YouTube videos, and I'm on Blossom a lot every day. And being new, everybody says, do your own research, make sure you know what you're buying. Except I don't actually know what to look for when I research. So I don't have the questions to say, oh, I'm going to research that ETF, but I don't actually know what to look for. So what are things that people should be looking for when you research anything?
So no, and see, that's one of those examples I was saying earlier, where like you have that question, I guarantee you, like 10 other people in this room have the exact same question. And thousands of people in the YouTube comments have the exact same question, and props to you for having the courage to ask it, right? If you are a beginner and you really don't know how to research a stock or how to evaluate a stock, and here's the thing about the stock market also, is like, I focus so much on the emphasis on quality companies. Even the best company doesn't mean it's a good time to buy the stock, because they could be overvalued. The company can still continue to grow, but if the valuation is too high, it can be the best company in the world and still not a good investment, right? Those are two generally similar things, but they can diverge in many cases. So if you don't know how to do that math, and again, you're not alone there, stick to ETFs, right? Because if you're buying an individual stock, you're really going all in on one stock, and you have to have the utmost conviction. You have to understand the qualitative things, meaning how does the company run? What is their history? What are their plans for the future? What's next in the pipeline? And then there's the numbers, the key metrics. Max was talking about PE, price to earnings ratio. Then there's growth rates, dividend payout ratio, debt levels, capital expenditures. Are there any potential liabilities? There's a whole host of things you need to evaluate, and that's not easy. It takes time. So if you don't have the time and you don't have the confidence yet to do that research, stick to ETFs, right? A broad market ETF where you're not trying to put all your money into one company or even 10 companies. You could spread your money across 500 companies, 250 companies. There's the broad market Canadian ETFs, there's the S&P 500, there's the NASDAQ 100 where you track the 100 biggest tech and growth heavy companies in the US. ETFs are such a simpler approach because you have to do far, far less research. And the fund managers kind of do that research for you because they tell you from the upfront, this is our objective, we're going to be tracking the 500 largest companies in the US. We will do the work of reshuffling it and rebalancing it and maybe dropping the losers and adding the winners, right? All you have to do is trust them. When you're analyzing the ETF, now there's still some research to be done. You have to understand what is the objective of the ETF, what are those management fees. Perry was saying the word NER, that's what you look for. You want the lower the better. And you want to look at what the sector breakdown is. So both in terms of geographically, like is it exclusively Canadian, exclusively US, a mix of both. And then also the sector breakdown. Is it like, 30% in tech, 20% in industrials, 10% in real estate, whatever it is. You need to understand that breakdown. And then further down, look at the individual holdings, right? Because a lot of ETFs you might think are diversified, but really they're so heavily concentrated on one or two stocks. And in that case, you're almost losing the main benefit of the ETF of diversification. I've seen some ETFs where like 40% of the entire fund is in one stock. So in that case, why not just buy that one stock? You know what I mean? The ETFs that I like are the ones that are like as spread out as possible, where they contain at least 40 stocks, and they're not going to be like all in on one or two heavy hitters. They're pretty well balanced. And again, last thing. This is kind of good advice for, especially for beginners, but even for veteran investors. Someone like me who've been investing for 12 years, I still primarily focus on these broad market ETFs because they're so simple, there's no surprises, you know what you're gonna get, and you're gonna have all your bases covered. So I think that's probably the safest approach.
Just one other thing to add to that, sorry.
Yeah.
You're talking about use ETFs if you don't want to do stock picking.
Yeah.
If you're looking for ETFs, this is again where Blossom is a benefit because again, where do you go? Oh, I can watch YouTube, I can do this. But if you just want to get a broad sense of a broad perspective from the people that are actually buying them, just go on Blossom and say, hey, I was thinking of buying WPay. What is everyone thinking about it? And you're going to get a wide variety of opinions, but you're going to see a common thread start following through. Yeah, you know what, WPay, they've been good, but they've really been sort of eroding, or they've sort of pulled back. I would maybe think of somebody else. So if you don't know what to ask, the best place to ask is something like Blossom, where you can just say, 100%. Here's where I'm interested in it, but what do you guys think? And then you get a nice round conversation starting, and you'll get a better feel what people are actually concerned about it or not concerned about it. And I think that's use the power of that social media. So yeah.
Nice. Now I don't have to say anything.
No. I took it from
Oh yeah. Well, maybe just to add, on Blossom there's a cool feature where you can see like the top most held ETFs in the community. And so the only thing I was going to add is, even with ETFs, there's thousands of different ETFs, and some of them are much more complicated. Like as Adrian was saying, like some of the most popular on Blossom and the most simple are like either an S&P 500 ETF where you're just buying the top 500 companies, or an asset allocation ETF, which is mostly S&P 500, but then also will often hold like some Canadian market, some international market. So I would say like for beginners, like I'd focus like first on that because that's like the most simple. And even when we're talking about mutual funds, a lot of mutual funds, they're just putting you in that anyway, just with like extra fees. So asset allocation ETFs are very, very similar to what a mutual fund manager would do anyway. And then as you learn more, you can start exploring some of these like more complicated funds. But yeah, from my portfolio like is majority in S&P 500, and Brandon's is majority in asset allocation because both of us are way too busy to spend time looking at the stocks and researching ETFs and all of that. So we keep it simple versus, Perry, you have lots of time, you have lots of knowledge and experience, right? So, yeah. How are we feeling for a question? How about raise your hand if we want to keep going with
Blossom question.
Sure, yeah.
So a little while back, you did have that round of the Blossom investing. Like that investment fund that you made $2.5 million.
Yeah.
Where I couldn't find out is like, I wanted to get in on it, but where's my return on investment on that one? So so is it through the pro version? Is it where you're getting your revenue from Blossom?
Oh, how does Blossom make its money? That's a good question. Well, one thing I'll share, and shout out the guy wearing the shareholder hoodie. I noticed that.
And I wanted to get that link
First
too,
batch.
but
yeah.
I didn't know what my return would have been.
100%. Like we tried to explain it like in the video, and it's very important that like investing in Blossom is very different than investing in like a stock or even an ETF. In fact, investing in any private company is a very high risk investment, right? Because you're very early stage in the company. There's a lot more competitive risks. There's a lot of execution risks, and so like we tried to make sure it was clear that this is actually like a fairly high risk investment. The way that Blossom makes money, and one of the things I'm very proud of, and you'll get the shareholder update, is actually a lot through the ETF industry. So we talked about how innovative ETFs are. There's launching new ETFs. If you guys saw in some of the other events, we had Harvest, BMO. So pretty much we work with almost every ETF brand, and more or less similar to any other social platform, we've built ways for them to help folks, investors, learn more about their funds. We try and do it in a way that like doesn't feel like an ad, right? So many of you guys may have seen like the Learn and Earn. It's sort of a win-win-win because like you can learn about an ETF, which you kind of already are wanting to do. You earn a little bit of money, and then in the ETF provider, they're raising awareness about their fund. Or another thing we did is an AMA. So we had Harvest do an AMA on Blossom. You guys get to ask questions to the chief investment officer. So those are actually like essentially like and we're clear about it, they're sponsored, but they're like educational in nature, so it's not like an app with like random like banner ads and like pop-up ads, like we never want to do that. And yeah, from a business perspective, like I'm very proud of how the team has executed. We've grown revenue from 1.1 million last year to 4 million. This year we're targeting 7 to 8 million next year. And the reason I feel so comfortable and to share that transparently is I think it's changed Blossom from this sort of like fun app idea to like a real sustainable business. And that I think is exciting for everyone, because for us, we're investing it all in growth, we're investing it all in cool new features, and it means that like Blossom's here to stay. Like in general, with any new app, there's a risk where you run out of money. Like we don't really have that risk. Well, we still have that risk, but it's much less than it was a year ago or 2 years ago.
So is there somewhere I can find the roadmap of what your plan is?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I'll talk to you after. Like more or less, the best place is the if you click on like a shareholder badge, you can click on the waitlist, and then the waitlist has the link to the pitch deck and everything there. So I think we're more transparent than like any other company. Like I don't mind sharing this because it's like A, 2,000 of our users are like actually shareholders, and B, like I think the more that Blossom grows and succeeds, like the more cool stuff we can build. So it's fun. Yeah.
So I consider myself like an intermediate investor. So I've gone through this experience. Like I don't know, for Perry, he's more like a cover call, and Adrian's more like a REIT person. I know you do like individual stocks. I know there's always like that segments of like narratives with the DIYers, and then people who have like professional designations. And I'm just curious about your experience, because like when I hear something like from Ben Felix, he would say that cover calls isn't for everybody. They have their place, and you might say also too that equity do better than REITs. But you like all have sort of forayed to your own sort of paradigms, if that makes sense. So I'm just curious, sort of like, because I believe like every person kind of figures that out for themselves. Because I think the best strategy is one that you can hold, especially long term. So yes. I think Adrian, you said like there's been periods where you see the market being down, and I'm just curious for you, Perry, sort of like your strategy might not work for everybody, correct? Because your situation wouldn't be everybody's situation here, correct?
I think Adrian said it already once.
Yeah.
And again, I've actually told a couple of people that said, I'm 25 and I'm gonna diversify, I'm gonna put all these covered calls together, I'm gonna generate this income, and I'm gonna reinvest it all back. And I said, well, if you're reinvesting it all back, then why are you an income investor? I mean, then why don't you focus on being a growth investor? Because the purpose of an income investor and an income portfolio is to generate income that you can, in some way or another, consume. Again, if that person would have told me, I'm going to consume 10% of it because it's going to make my car payments, and the rest of it I'm going to reinvest back and stuff, okay, you're now back to saying that you want to consume some of it. But it's not good for it's not ideal for anybody that's using an income strategy to basically accumulate wealth, accumulate growth. Its purpose is to capitalize income. That's what it is. It's not eroding, it's capitalizing income so that you can use it and spend it. If you're doing it and just putting it all back again, it might work. I mean, there are some really high yielding ones that are reinvesting and you're actually growing pretty good, but the underlyings are going to outperform the cover call, because the cover call's job is not to beat the underlying, it's to harvest income from the underlying. And that's what people got to get mixed up. There's no good A versus B or enemy of one or two. You're a growth investor if you're trying to accumulate growth with no income requirements. You're an income investor if you want to start taking some of it out, and even though if it's not all of it, but take some of it out and then use the rest for reinvesting. And then there's the hybrid investor, and that's a very valid approach too. Like, there's no A strategy or B strategy. There are people that are using conservative cover call income strategy, and the money that's coming out of it, this is a tax advantage. My daughter's doing this one. They take the money out of the money that's being income generated out of the TFSA, put it into the RRSP, and then buy growth stocks in the RRSP. Guess what she gets? She gets a tax deduction. She gets the income,
and she basically, because she'll take, okay, I need about half of that for my monthly expenses. The other half I'm gonna take out and I'm gonna put into my RSP. I get a tax deduction and it's building up my RSP when I basically retire. So hybrid is just as valid as anything else. So the idea is there's such spectrum between A and B, right? So, yeah.
Bottom line, it's one of my favorite lines I've repeated many times in my YouTube videos. The personal finance is personal, right? And even just seeing between Perry and I, we disagree, but not because I think cover calls are a scam. That's insane. I know you'll see some inflammatory headlines or thumbnails on YouTube being like, oh, it's a scam, or RSPs are a scam. No, but none of them are scams. They all have a place. All of them are different tools, right? And some tools are better for certain jobs than others, right? And for any kind of investor, whether you're a beginner, or you're closer to retire, or you're a veteran, it doesn't really matter. You really have to do a self-assessment. You have to sit down and really weigh your options. How long do I need this money for? Can I invest it for 20 years and never look at it? Or will I need this money to buy a house in 5 years from now? Or will I need this money 10 years from now to send my kids to school? Also, you have to ask yourself, what's my risk appetite? How do I handle periods of volatility? For example, in 2020, when the markets were frozen, they shut down the stock market, and people lost their assets by 30% in a matter of days. I was okay because I knew I was already mentally prepared for that kind of thing. Other people might not be able to stomach that. And if that's you, that's important to recognize. Don't fool yourself. Be really honest and transparent with how you think you would handle significant drops. And if you think you would lose sleep seeing your portfolio go in the red by 20%, then maybe you focus more on more defensive stocks or more conservative investments. Maybe you beef it up a little bit more with blue chip dividend stocks or maybe you get bond ETFs, something like that. Also, you have to think about, what kind of investor you want to be, how hands-on you want to be. Like what Max was saying, Max and Brandon are super, super busy. They don't have the luxury of time to and go through, quarterly earnings reports and analyze financial metrics. I do, I love that. For me, it's fun to do that. But Max and Brandon, they don't have the time anymore. And that's okay. And another thing to consider also is, as your circumstances change, your strategy can change. Look at Brandon. 2 years ago, he was exclusively individual stocks because he loved doing those investments. He had that knowledge and expertise. Now he has 2 young daughters. He doesn't have the time to do that research anymore, so he switched 100% into ETFs. And the same for me, I don't do cover calls, but like Perry said, I'm in the accumulation phase. Eventually, when I have a multi-million-dollar portfolio and I need to start withdrawing some income, I probably will incorporate a portion of that into cover calls. As your circumstances change, you always have to kind of reevaluate, and don't be afraid to change your strategy as the conditions change. And again, and what works for you might not work for me, and vice versa. And don't be afraid of that. Learn from all of us. See what we're doing on Blossom. See our portfolios, but never, ever, ever blindly copy any one of us, because I guarantee you we have different goals, different risk tolerances, different time horizons. So understand our thought process on why we're doing what we're doing, and then pick and choose what applies to you, and then make your own strategy that fits you.
I'm mindful of that we could go all night, and some folks, including myself, may need to use the washroom. So, since it's a small group, how about we wrap it up there, and then, we're sticking around. We can keep chatting, and we can stay as late as you guys want to late. So yeah, one more big round of applause for these guys. Since I don't need the mic. We started doing something this year, which is our version of the YouTube plaque, and for creators on Blossom who have inspired us all and who've hit some big milestones, the 5,000 follower milestones. And so I have a gift for Perry that I want to give you, and it's pretty cool plaque. So big round of applause for Perry for all his.
Stay up there, we'll put it on Blossom.
What's that?
Stay up there, we'll put it on Blossom.
Okay.
Sorry. I'm just
After he ties his shoes.
I'm just manhandling you right now. I'm just trying to make sure we get this covered. All right.